Ladies and gentlemen, the Lullaby Dance Ensemble. With music composed and performed by my dear friend and pseudo-contemporary, Johann Sebastian Bach. The Lullaby, Dialogue, Choir.
Emptiness, emergence, structure, and life. Understanding and fulfillment. Before humanity's eyes, all along.
My name is Galileo Galilee. I was born in the year 1564. I died in the year 1642. No thanks to the Inquisition. When I was one among the living, I authored a book titled Dialogue concerning the two chief world systems. In the book, I presented a discussion between three men concerning the issue of the day. The clash between the Ptolemaic view of existence, which placed the Earth at the center of the known universe, and the Copernican view of existence, which placed the Sun at the center of the known universe. The matter of the Earth and Sun has been resolved. In my favor, I might add. In the current performance, titled Dialogue, I present a discussion between three individuals concerning the matter that today grips humanity in the realm of the living, or, as we in the hereafter call it, the birthing world. Among souls yet to pass, two points of view dominate humankind's understanding of itself and of creation: the within and the without. The without, or the external as we may refer to it, is the physical, or objective side of existence. As those in the realm of the living would describe it, the without is anatomy, organic structure, and biological function. It is the organization of the cosmos, the composition of the molecule, and the configuration of the atom. The without is time and space, matter in all its forms, and energy revealed through its effect on matter. It is that which we can map, plot, count, and statistically analyze. The within, or the internal, is the non-physical or subjective side of existence. It is love, intuition, and creativity. It is the awareness of self and surroundings that pervades life. It is the belief that many, if not most, among the living have that the soul carries on after death, and that there is an entity of consciousness we take to be God. The within is that which we experience and know in our hearts to exist, but cannot account for quantitatively or by other tangible means. Costumed such that the scholars of Lullaby University assure me represents the intellectual elite among the living, we have to your left, our Salviati. He is a man who embraces the within of creation, as well as the without, and who, by way of discussion and articulation, seeks to convey his understanding. On your right, we have our Simplicio. Representative of science in the narrow sense, he denies the within. God is wishful thinking. Death marks an end with no beginning. He worships the random and the statistical. In the mind of Simplicio, the universe is mechanical, mathematical, purely tangible, purely external. Between them is our Sagredo, or rather, our Sagrida. She is a woman who strives for truth, and who is willing to venture wherever the quest for such may take her. Convinced that there is more to existence than what we see and measure, she aspires to embrace the within, alongside the without. To understand the struggle of the mind that today grips the realm of the earth, and those yet to pass, there is only one place to begin: the beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, the book, Dialogue.
Perhaps the least disputed fact about the universe is that complex things are composed of simple things. Protons, neutrons, and electrons bind to make atoms, which fuse to make molecules, which clump to make stars and planets.
Stars and planets arrange to form solar systems, which organize to form galaxies, which aggregate to form galactic clusters.
organic molecules, unite, to create simple metabolic systems, which arrange to make cells, which unite to make organs, and organisms.
People bond to form families. Families group to make communities. Communities unite to create cities, and cities align to create states and nations.
Therefore, in an evolving universe, where the present arose out of the past, to look back in time, is to observe the universe, in a simpler state.
The complex patterns of social organization, seen in human societies, meld into the less complex patterns of social organization, seen in animal societies.
Mammals emerged after reptiles, which emerged after amphibians, which emerged after fish, which emerged after algae.
Galactic clusters formed after galaxies, which formed after stellar bodies, which formed after molecules, which formed after atoms and subatomic particles.
Projection of this trend, therefore, allows us to deduce the existence of an initial, simplest, state. The least complex state we can imagine. The universe's primordial seed, the point with which it all began. The state of existence, we call emptiness.
Physicists have tossed around the idea of the universe's origin as a state of emptiness for better than a century. Such has a flaw that no amount of wishful philosophy, on your part, Salviati, will allow one of a scientific mind to circumvent. By definition, emptiness is empty. And that which is empty is incapable of giving rise to that which is not empty.
Simplicio has a point. How can nothing give rise to something?
Did I say that nothing gave rise to something? From the standpoint of the without, emptiness appears as envisioned by traditional science, null, vacuous, the cosmic void. From the standpoint of the within, emptiness is not empty at all.
A leap of faith.
I ask you, my fellows on the journey, to understand the nature and meaning of creation. How do you and I experience emptiness?
Emptiness is loneliness.
Indeed, Sagrita.
But it is more. To feel loneliness is to feel absence. To feel absence is to feel the need to create that which will resolve our absence. Emptiness is want. Emptiness is desire. Emptiness is yearning.
Formally defined, emptiness is the consciousness of the need to create fulfillment, and thus of the motivation to create fulfillment, and of the uncertainty, or potential uncertainty, as to how to create fulfillment.
Here we go, the consciousness thing.
The universe began as a state of consciousness, but not such a state as we are accustomed to conceptualizing it. The universe began as a state of consciousness, more primitive than our own awareness, or of any in our modern experience. Based on traditional notions of the divine, such a state would also be more primitive than any we associate with a god, or supreme being.
The simplest state imaginable.
At its origin, the universe existed as the most rudimentary state of consciousness we can fathom. As an elemental sense of void, as a fundamental discernment of motivation, and of impending uncertainty. The universe existed in a state of potential. The universe began as emptiness. At its beginning, the universe felt the need to create fulfillment.
Chapter 1, Emergence. In an evolving universe, simple things came into existence before complex things. Logic, therefore, leads us to conclude that the universe began in the simplest of all states, emptiness. From the standpoint of the without, emptiness appears as we would expect it to appear, null, vacuous, the cosmic void. From the standpoint of the within, emptiness is not empty at all. The universe began as an elemental consciousness, as a fundamental awareness of motivation, and of impending uncertainty. The universe existed in a state of potential. The universe began as emptiness. At its beginning, the universe felt the need to create fulfillment. What, then, are time and space? And, how did time and space emerge from the universe's primordial state of emptiness?
It is so simple. From what form of being, other than emptiness, could the universe have emerged? What state could be more elemental? What state could have come before?
As a scientist, Salviati, I must enlighten you. The fundamental organizational principle of the universe has nothing to do with emptiness, as you associate it with consciousness. The fundamental organizational principle of the universe is the notion of the random,
which is another way to look at the notion of the infinite.
Indeed, Sagrita, we derive the idea of the random from the idea of the infinite. Both are constructs of the mathematical language.
The probabilistic math, that is quantum mechanics, tells us that the universe began as a random fluctuation. Statistically, therefore, there could be an infinite number of fluctuations, and thus an infinite number of universes.
But if the random and the infinite are constructs of the mathematical language, ideas invented by mathematicians, and not intrinsic to nature, random fluctuations and multiple universes make no sense.
To fluctuate means to change. The notion that the universe began as a random fluctuation, or that the universe's initial state of emptiness, in some random way, became no longer empty, imposes a quantum mechanical ideal on a point in the universe's becoming, where it has no meaning, where there are no quanta to get mechanical about.
Simplicio, the concept of the random, doesn't tell us anything.
For the moment, I ask you to accept the notion of the universe's origin as emptiness, as I have defined such. The ease with which we explain the within and the without of creation will prove its validity. To understand time and space, and how from the universe's initial state of void, time and space came into existence, recall our definition of emptiness.
Emptiness is the consciousness of the need to create fulfillment, and thus of the motivation to create fulfillment, and of the uncertainty, or potential uncertainty, as to how to create fulfillment.
Which brings us to three derivative ideas: 1. Fulfillment, 2. Object, and 3. Perception.
Fulfillment is the antithesis of emptiness. Fulfillment is the consciousness of need satisfaction. Absent are want, motivation, and uncertainty.
To further the train of logic, disconcerting though one of a scientific mind may take it to be, object is what we want. It is that which, when we obtain it, allows for the fulfillment of need.
Perception denotes movement. It is the act of perceiving the object of need to be our own. By way of this action, by way of this movement, we transform the experience of emptiness into the experience of fulfillment.
Emptiness, fulfillment, object, and perception are abstractions. They are concepts that allow us to understand the behavior of consciousness on the primitive level of the universe's emergence. At the beginning, the universe existed in a state of emptiness. Motivated by emptiness, or the need to create fulfillment, the universe took as the object of its need that which denotes fulfillment. The universe turned in on itself and grasped itself in its own awareness. The universe perceived itself as the object of its need. As it did, the act of perception manifested in an external construct that we can crudely visualize as uniform energy that existed as all space. Is not time and space that which action exists as, or reveals itself through.
With the perception of itself as object, the universe's need to create fulfillment stood realized. The universe's consciousness of emptiness became the universe's consciousness of fulfillment.
But no sooner had fulfillment begun than it ended. Fulfillment results from perception of object. Perception is driven by need. With fulfillment, need, and perception ended, and the universe's external manifestation snapped out of existence.
The first click of time and the first flash of space had passed.
Emptiness returned and felt more empty. The universe had marked its first creative cycle.
Back to where we started. A philosophical computer program stuck in a loop.
Such would be true if it were not for two factors. The first is the growth of consciousness we stated took place during the creative cycle. Autocatalysis of consciousness. The second is the one characteristic of emptiness we have yet to consider: uncertainty.
Consciousness plus action and experience gives greater consciousness. As a result of perceiving itself as the object of its need, the universe would experience emptiness in a more aware, more evolved way.
As for the second matter, logic tells us that the inability of an action to produce, or to sustain, a desired outcome, increases the uncertainty as to the outcome created by a repeat of the action.
At the end of the universe's initial creative cycle, the consciousness that was the universe experienced emptiness in a more evolved way. Moreover, this amplified experience of emptiness consisted of two facets. Most was felt as the need to create fulfillment. A fraction, however, was felt as the uncertainty as to how to create fulfillment. Motivated by a more evolved, intensely felt experience of emptiness, the creative cycle repeated.
Step 1. Emptiness-motivated perception of object. Step 2. Perception manifested in the without, and transformed the experience of emptiness into the experience of fulfillment. Step 3. With fulfillment, need and perception ended. Time and space snapped out of existence. Emptiness returned and felt emptier.
The second click of time, and the second flash of space, had passed.
As logic dictates, however, uncertainty had grown. It now occupied a larger fraction of the universe's consciousness of emptiness.
Cycle after cycle, the process repeated. Consciousness evolved to an increasingly intense experience of emptiness, and to an increasingly intense experience of fulfillment, which resulted in what we can visualize as uniform energy that occupied all of expanded space.
The clicks of time and the flashes of space passed.
We, however, cannot separate time from space. As more than a century ago Einstein understood, time and space are one, time-space.
I believe Einstein referred to it as space-time.
With each creative cycle, the need to create fulfillment increased, and spacetime manifested in a more expressed way. Uncertainty, however, occupied a greater portion of the universe's experience of emptiness.
Then the universe reached the cycle where it felt the entire experience of emptiness as uncertainty.
Locked in doubt, the universe no longer felt the drive to perceive itself as the object of need. It no longer felt the motivation to power another creative cycle.
The consciousness that was creation faced an end. An end, however, exists with respect to a beginning.
At the cycle where uncertainty occupied the universe's entire experience of emptiness, the obsolescence of the universe's present course of advance was no longer in doubt.
And with this certainty, uncertainty collapsed.
To release the entirety of the universe's now amplified experience of emptiness, to be felt as the desire to create fulfillment, as the motivation to propel creation to a new level, and in a new direction.
The universe crossed a creative threshold. The creative cycle began again, but on a new evolutionary level.
The universe not only grasped itself as an entity of consciousness within itself, it grasped itself as grasping itself. The universe not only perceived itself as the object of its need to create fulfillment, it perceived itself as perceiving itself.
An act of perception within an act of perception.
Consciousness had differentiated. By virtue of the creative threshold, the universe existed as two entities of consciousness that, aligned by a nestled act of perception, comprised the consciousness of the whole.
From the standpoint of the without, this wrap of perception would manifest in two regions of uniform energy that comprised all space.
During the universe's second cycle at its new evolutionary level, it wrapped the more complex degree of perception it had become, to grasp itself as four entities of consciousness within itself. Externally, this manifested as two groups of two time-space regions.
Cycle after cycle, consciousness multiplied. The clicks of time passed and space became more complex and differentiated.
As your algorithm dictates, however, multiplication of consciousness was not without its end.
With each creative cycle, uncertainty occupied a larger portion of the universe's experience of emptiness.
And the cycle came where uncertainty overwhelmed.
The consciousness that was the universe, poised to cross its second evolutionary threshold.
Uncertainty collapsed, To release the full force of the universe's intensified and more evolved experience of emptiness, to be felt is the motivation to create fulfillment. This motivation lifted the universe to the form that would allow it to enter its next major evolutionary stage, structure. Externally, the universe existed as an entity made up of regions of uniform energy, organized to form a fabric of time-space. Internally, the universe existed as an entity poised for the development of structure. An entity made up of autonomous entities of consciousness, aligned by a web, or structure, of perception, to create the consciousness of the whole. The universe crossed the threshold of autonomy and unity.
Chapter 2, Structure. By way of the creative cycle and creative threshold, or the mechanism of what we call the creative process, the universe advanced from a state of emptiness through the evolutionary period of emergence. The creative process is the means through which the consciousness that is creation overcomes uncertainty to recreate itself in a state of higher consciousness. The fundamental force, or energy, behind this transformation, is emptiness. The fundamental aim is the creation of a more conscious, highly evolved experience of fulfillment. Moreover, one click of time and one rebirth of space occur with each act of perception, or with each creative cycle. Flow of time and transformation of space occur with subsequent acts of perception, or with subsequent creative cycles. Our view limited to the without, we take the universe to be an evolution of matter, that with the advent of life, achieved the complexity to manifest in consciousness. When we incorporate the within into our thinking, we take the universe to be an evolution of consciousness, that at every stage of its becoming, manifested in an evolution of matter. Evolution of consciousness theory.
At the onset of the evolutionary period of structure, the consciousness that was creation consisted of two facets. One portion was associated with the entities of lesser consciousness, from which the whole was composed. Another portion was associated with the structure of perception, through which the entities were related.
To evolve to greater consciousness and fulfillment, the universe could advance by increasing the awareness of its component entities, and by increasing the awareness associated with their structure of perception. It achieved these ends by way of the relationship.
As, creative cycle after creative cycle, the universe perceived itself as the object of its need to create fulfillment. The entities of consciousness, from which it was composed, perceived one another as the object of their need to create fulfillment. Entities aligned to form relationships. As aspects of consciousness perceived one another as the object of the need to create fulfillment, the relationship generated its own local creative cycles. It maintained its own local structure of perception. As such, the relationship would display the characteristics we associate with the creative cycle and a structure of perception.
The relationship would be a distinct item, an autonomous aspect of consciousness in and of itself.
The whole would be greater than the sum of the parts.
Similarly, the nature of a comprising entity would be a function of its relationship to the entities it perceives as the object of need.
An entity in a relationship with one entity would be different from an entity in a relationship with two or more entities. By virtue of its structure of perception, an entity would have a nature, an identity.
As well, entities of consciousness in numerically large relationships would be pulled away to form numerically small relationships. This would limit the size or collective tendency of the relationship.
The characteristics we associate with the creative cycle and a structure of perception would also manifest in the external. As entities of consciousness align to create relationships, regions of time-space align to create arrangements of regions.
As we would expect, however, these regions did not exist as objects in time-space. They defined a fabric of time-space.
Let us give the universe's elemental time-space regions a name.
Particles.
The relationship, or the arrangement of what we may call particles, exists within, but autonomous from, the universe's overall fabric of time and space, as a time-space fabric relative to its own being.
Relative time-space.
As Einstein recognized.
Moreover, the greater the number of local acts of perception, for the universe's overall act of perception, the faster the pace of time, or more precisely the faster the pace of what time, as it applies to the universe's overall movement represents, evolution. As the number of relationships increased, evolution accelerated.
Einstein didn't see that one coming.
Over a sequence of spatial rebirths, we see particles unite to form clusters of particles. We see large clusters torn apart to form small clusters. Clusters of particles would exist in regions of relative time-space. These regions would change as new clusters formed and old clusters broke apart. Finally, all regions of local external manifestation would exist within an overall fabric of space and accelerating time.
But the evolutionary stage of the relationship was not without its end.
With each cycle, more of the universe's experience of emptiness was felt as uncertainty, and less was felt as the motivation needed to drive the next cycle. Then the universe reached the point where it exhausted its potential to create fulfillment through the simple relationship.
Uncertainty overwhelmed and collapsed to release the universe's vastly amplified consciousness of emptiness to be felt as motivation.
Creation turned in, on itself, to embrace itself as what it had become, an entity poised for the development of complex internal and external structure, an entity defined by the existence of the relationship.
To understand the universe's structural complexification, we must refine our view of the creative process.
Evolution is delineated by a series of thresholds. Most denote minor advances. A few denote major thrusts forward. In either case, the creative threshold not only represents a leap to a higher evolutionary level, but a crossroads, or a turning point. The creative threshold is the pivotal moment at which the universe has the potential to set forth in one of a number of alternative evolutionary directions. For the most part, the alternative evolutionary directions available at each juncture are established by those that came before. The expansion of consciousness in the universe's first evolutionary stage made possible the multiplication of entities of consciousness in the universe's second evolutionary stage. The multiplication of entities of consciousness in the universe's second evolutionary stage made possible the formation of relationships in the universe's third evolutionary stage. New levels are built on old levels. Within the range set by the alternative evolutionary directions that came before, however, there is no set mechanism to determine the course to follow. The process is dynamic, distinguished by groping and trial and error. To behave as such is the nature of consciousness. The more evolved the consciousness, the greater its freedom of action.
Salviati, if at each juncture, the universe can progress in one of a number of alternative evolutionary directions, and, by virtue of trial and error, these directions may or may not be correct, what happens to the incorrect evolutionary lines? What happens to the lines of advance that have no enduring value in the endgame of creation?
Endowed with freedom, creativity advances in two directions. On one hand, the creative process brings into existence the new. On the other hand, the creative process reshapes the old, expanding on certain elements, and discarding others. As if it were a comet followed by its tail, creativity's forward line, or arrow, advances to greater perfection, and its trailing line, or arrow, aligns in support of the leading edge of evolution's advance. This results in a characteristic, branching pattern of evolution. Cycle after cycle, threshold after threshold, with all the characteristics we now associate with the creative process, relationships perceived one another, and individual entities of consciousness, as the object of their need. By doing so, they formed more intricate and conscious relationships. These relationships perceived one another as the object of need, to form still more complex and conscious arrangements.
About 15 billion years ago, quarks came into existence, as did electrons and other indivisible particles. Soon after, protons and neutrons formed and came together to create the first nuclei. About 300,000 years later, nuclei captured electrons to form the first hydrogen, helium, and other simple atoms. About 700,000 years later, these simple atoms came together to create the first hydrogen and other simple molecules. Not long after molecular development, the first clouds of stellar gas aggregated, composed of hydrogen and helium. About 1 billion years after emergence, clouds of stellar gas concentrated to form the first celestial bodies, objects that with their luminescence we would call stars. About 2 billion years after emergence, the first proto-galaxies took shape. During the next 5 billion years, the first galaxies, galactic clusters, and higher levels of cosmic order came into existence. Evolution's leading edge returned to the microscopic, where about 8 billion years ago, the first heavy elements came into existence, followed by ionic compounds. Not long after, evolution's forward arrow returned to the macroscopic, and the first solar systems that contained planets made from heavy elements and ionic compounds organized.
But the evolution of the cosmos did not take place in the tidy, stair-step manner our discussion may suggest. On evolution's leading edge, the creative process brought into existence the new. On evolution's trailing edge, the creative process aligned prior levels in support, and where such were not needed, allowed them to fall out of existence.
Take the formation of the atom. When evolution crossed the threshold from the level of the subatomic particle, to the level of the nucleus, and then to the level of the atom, the subatomic level realigned in support, and particles not needed to sustain atomic structure, fell out of existence. Physicists have identified a great number of subatomic particles, but only the proton, neutron, electron, and a handful of others, exist under any but the most high energy and thus primitive evolutionary conditions.
From threshold to threshold, the external became more familiar. Structure of perception manifested in bonding, attraction, and repulsion. Stars, planets, and other celestial bodies displayed patterns of association. Increasingly, we are able to characterize the cosmos in terms of matter, energy, movement, and dimensions. Time as, say, measured by radioactive decay, passed at a constant rate.
The laws of physics solidified.
When we embrace the within, alongside the without, we do not negate physical theory. Relativity and quantum mechanics effectively map the behavior of the external. Evolution of consciousness theory wraps physical theory in an overall explanatory construct, and, as such, offers a fundamentally new level of explanation. When we embrace consciousness as a variable, the pieces of the puzzle that is creation fall into place, as if they have been before humanity's eyes all along. In the cosmos, we find subatomic particles, atoms, molecules, and ionic compounds. We find stars, planets, solar systems, galaxies, galactic clusters, and walls of galactic clusters. We find quasars, pulsars, black holes, and white dwarfs. What mechanism other than the creative process unites mathematical certitude with creative freedom in a way that accounts for the universe's order and diversity?
If we could transport ourselves back in time and witness the evolution of the cosmos, if we could view the within, alongside the without, would we not be looking at the emerging consciousness that was the universe? Would we not be looking at the expanding mind that was creation?
Atoms and molecules. Stars and galaxies. Black holes and white dwarfs. Solar systems and planets. The emerging mind that is creation.
As remarkable as was cosmic evolution, cosmogenesis was not without its end. About 5 billion years ago, the universe exhausted its potential to create fulfillment through cosmic formation. Uncertainty overwhelmed and collapsed. Consciousness turned in on itself and embraced itself as what it had become. All that we take to be the cosmos fell into the realm of evolution's trailing arrow, and the universe crossed the threshold to a more evolved line of advance.
Carbon and hydrogen atoms, arranged to create simple organic molecules. The simple metabolic system came into being.
A metabolic system maintains and enhances its structural integrity by importing matter from and exporting matter to its surroundings. In this way, the system overcomes the second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy, or the tendency for a physical system to spontaneously and irreversibly slide toward a state of disorder.
A metabolic system overcomes the tide of evolution's trailing arrow.
In a metabolic system, structure supersedes components. One atom can be replaced by another atom, but the structure remains. Like a minuscule expression of the universe, the metabolic system perceives itself as the object of its need. It embodies the consciousness to grow and evolve, the awareness to fully sustain its creative process.
The earth solidified and cooled. An atmosphere formed. Oceans formed, and the planet's early waters were a soup of organic molecules and simple metabolic activity.
Then, about 4 billion years ago, the universe exhausted its potential to create fulfillment through the evolution of the organic molecule and simple metabolic system. The creative process builds on, and creatively discards the old, to bring forth the new. The refinement of the simple metabolic system made possible the leap that would propel the universe beyond its age of structural formation, and across the threshold to its next major line of evolutionary advance, life.
The universe turned in on itself and grasped itself as what it had become.
Externally, simple metabolic systems perceived one another as object, to create a new class of metabolic systems. The first single-celled life forms emerged, entities capable of reproduction. Like the engineer who designs a car built on a distant assembly line, the universe rose above the level of structural formation, and set forth on its next logical course of advance. By way of cellular reproduction, the creative process relegated structure, and its formation, to the local level, to the level of the cell. The universe marked the turning point that constituted life. The universe crossed the threshold, to embrace design as separate from, and above structure, design over structure.
Chapter 3, Life. By way of the cycles and thresholds, and the building on and discarding of the old to create the new, that defines the creative process, the universe advanced from an originating state of emptiness, through the evolutionary periods of emergence and structure. Entities of consciousness became more defined, more autonomous. Entity collectivity decreased. The universe evolved from a state of lesser consciousness and fulfillment, to a state of greater consciousness and fulfillment. The mind that was creation expanded. From the standpoint of the external, the advent of life appears mysterious, elusive. When we embrace the within, alongside the without, the line between life and pre-life stands out. The evolutionary period of structure concluded, with the turn that allowed the consciousness that is creation, to advance beyond the simple arrangement of components, to form more complex structure. The cell came into being, defined by the ability to reproduce. The universe crossed the threshold of design, over structure.
At the onset of the evolutionary period of life, the universe existed as an entity of consciousness that embodied a complex internal and external structure. This structure included subatomic, atomic, molecular, complex molecular, simple metabolic, and cellular levels. The trailing arrow of the universe's overall creative process was locked in reshaping all but the most recent of these levels. The leading arrow was locked in the design of the single-celled life form.
The earliest cells were simple bacteria and cyanobacteria, the latter commonly called blue-green algae. These life forms would be most closely related to the single-celled entities known as prokaryote.
From the standpoint of the without, the cell displays a complex relationship between structure and function, defined by the embodiment of a DNA molecule, deoxyribonucleic acid. DNA contains the coded information the cell needs to maintain and reproduce its structure.
From the standpoint of the within, the cell is a conscious entity, made up of aspects of lesser consciousness, related through a complex structure of perception. To sustain the cell's existence, more deeply embedded levels of cell creative activity function in support of less deeply embedded levels. This is particularly apparent when it comes to the act of reproduction, or simple cell division.
During its reproductive phase, the cell grows roughly to double its normal size. The cell's DNA duplicates, and one copy moves to either side of the cell. The cell constricts in the middle and separates to become two entities.
From the standpoint of the within, reproduction expresses the consciousness manifest in the DNA molecule. With each local creative cycle, cell structure of perception duplicates. With each local creative threshold, replication enters a new stage to climax in cell division.
By about 3.5 billion years ago, the first cells able to conduct photosynthesis, using oxygen and carbon dioxide emerged. This led to a buildup of oxygen in the atmosphere, and to the formation of a protective ozone layer.
By about 3.2 billion years ago, blue-green algae perceived one another as the object of need, but too primitive to form more tightly bound relationships, arranged to create the first social structures, highly collective mat-like arrangements of cells, similar to those seen in pond slimes today.
Perhaps as early, the first cells containing cilia and flagella emerged. These whip-like extensions made it possible for the cell to propel itself through the water.
By about 1.4 billion years ago, prokaryotic cells perceived one another as object, to form a new class of single-celled entities, eukaryote. Eukaryotic cells contain a nucleus, which houses most of the cell's DNA, and internal structures called organelles, that, like the prokaryotic cells from which they originated, contain their own DNA.
By about 1.2 billion years ago, the complex structure found in the eukaryotic cell made possible two developments that changed the face of life. These were sex and genetically programmed death or lifespan.
As the pace of evolution increased and new species originated with greater frequency, sex emerged as a mechanism to amplify the number of alternative evolutionary directions available at each threshold.
Whereas sex involved the leading arrow of evolution, lifespan involved the trailing arrow. Internalization of death was the mechanism through which evolution more rapidly discarded the old.
With sex and lifespan, ancestry began, and successive generations formed a lineage.
Threshold after threshold, more complex and conscious single-celled entities emerged. Cell function reached new levels of complexity, and social structure progressed to the cell colony. By 800 million years ago, heterotrophy, or the feeding by one species of life on another, had become widespread.
In response, ecosystems and the totality of organic interaction we refer to as the biosphere became more complex.
By about 750 million years ago, the creative process had exhausted its potential to advance through the evolution of unicellular life. The universe crossed the threshold to a more complex form of biological structure and function. The first multicellular entity emerged. The first multicelled entities came into existence when various single-celled entities perceived one another as the object of need, and by doing so created a relationship. Over time, the creative process gave rise to more complex relationships that joined with other relationships to create entities with multiple levels of structure and function. Life forms composed of organs and organ systems emerged. Along with the evolution of the organism, the Earth's biosphere evolved to reflect increasingly complex interaction between species and ecosystems.
At the onset of the Paleozoic era, life was confined to the oceans, which teemed with worms, sponges, mollusks, and other invertebrate organisms. By about 500 million years ago, the Earth's landmasses had come together to create a vast continental area, much of which was submerged beneath a shallow sea. In this and other aquatic regions, corals and clams flourished, as did primitive fish. By 450 million years ago, plants had colonized land, followed by animals.
By about 250 million years ago, the Earth's landmasses had aligned to form a single supercontinent, Pangaea. Not long after, a major evolutionary threshold was crossed, and many if not most of the Earth's species died out, in what paleontologists consider the greatest mass extinction of all time, the Paleozoic extinction.
The Paleozoic era had ended, ushering in the Mesozoic era, the age of the reptile. Early in the Mesozoic, Pangaea split into two continents, the southern called Gondwanaland, the northern called Laurasia.
Gondwanaland then split into what would become India, Africa, Australia, Antarctica, and South America. And Laurasia split into what would become Asia, Europe, and North America.
Biologically, the Mesozoic saw the rise of many new life forms, but none that has captured our attention more than the dinosaur. The earliest dinosaurs were comparatively small creatures that ran on their hind feet and balanced their bodies against the weight of enormous tails. By 195 million years ago, the various species we know best had emerged. Triceratops and Stegosaurus, Apatosaurus and Tyrannosaurus rex, Plesiosaurus and Pterodactylus.
Which brings us to the most definitive characteristic of the higher organism. As the creative process advanced, and the universe rose to greater awareness, organisms of greater complexity and consciousness emerged. Most dramatically, this expansion of consciousness was expressed by the organism's ability to think and learn.
Thought and learning is how creative activity takes place on the top level of organism consciousness. By the cycles and thresholds, the trial and error, and the building on and discarding of the old to create the new, of the creative process, the pre-human organism evolves within itself. It internalizes its world. It thinks and learns abstractly.
As more conscious organisms emerged, behavior became more flexible. The shades of uncertainty, we call emotions, matured. To allow for abstract thought and learning, a mechanism within the organism, to build on and creatively discard the old to create the new, came into existence, sleep and dream. Social structure became more complex and interwoven, or less collective. Life became more lifelike. At the end of the Mesozoic era, 65 million years ago, a threshold was crossed, and another mass extinction swept the planet. The age of the mammal had begun, and among the mammalian orders to emerge, was the primate. Life's line of consciousness had founded the branch that would one day lead to ourselves.
The Earth entered its most recent geological era, the Cenozoic. By about 54 million years ago, the ancestors of the horse, camel, rodent and rhinoceros had emerged, as had the ancestors of the modern whale. By about 38 million years ago, true carnivores had appeared, animals that resembled modern dogs and cats. By about 27 million years ago, various grazing species had evolved, as had their predators.
By about 12 million years ago, modern versions of the elephant, mammoth, and mastodon inhabited the planet, the latter two now extinct. Wolves had also emerged, as had the fox, lion, puma, otter, buffalo, antelope, hippopotamus, and the now vanished saber-toothed tiger.
The primate line branched into two suborders, prosimians and anthropoids. The prosimians changed little over time, and became the modern loris, lemur, and tarsier. The anthropoids gave rise to the monkey, gibbon, and orangutan, and to a number of early ape-like species.
One of these ape-like species branched into the line that led to the modern gorilla and chimpanzee. It also branched into the line that led to an infinitely more remarkable organic form.
By about 5 million years ago, creatures that embodied primitive human characteristics had emerged. Australopithecus.
By about 2 million years ago, the various Australopithecus forms had fallen into extinction, to be replaced by a creature with more pronounced human features. Homo habilis.
By about 1.7 million years ago, Homo habilis had disappeared, to be replaced by a creature still closer to ourselves. Homo erectus.
Between 500 and 300,000 years ago, Homo erectus gave rise to what from an anatomical standpoint, we can describe as various archaic forms of our own species, Homo sapiens. The best known of our archaic forms is Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, or Neanderthal.
About 100,000 years ago, or somewhat earlier, the 4 billion years of evolution, embodied in the archaic human nervous system, made possible the development that, in the evolution of consciousness view of creation, draws an unmistakable line between humanity and earlier human forms. The archaic human psyche contained the potential transformation that would propel the universe beyond its age of life and into its next major evolutionary era, the age of understanding. Uncertainty overwhelmed and collapsed. The archaic human psyche turned in on itself and embraced itself as what it had become. Our level of abstract thought and learning had become wrapped within a higher level of consciousness. On its uppermost level, human awareness existed above abstraction, above the organic level of our being. We became a creature that was self-aware, conscious of our own consciousness. No longer did we merely know, we knew that we knew. No longer did we merely think, we pondered our ability to think. No longer did we merely learn, we understood that we learned. Through our ability to contemplate the nature of existence, the consciousness that was creation stood face to face with itself. The universe crossed the threshold to reflection.
Chapter 4, Understanding. Through the mechanism of the creative process, the consciousness that is the universe advanced from an originating state of emptiness through the evolutionary periods of emergence, structure, and life. By virtue of humanity and the human being, the latter period concluded with the development that allowed the universe to evolve beyond mere awareness, the threshold to reflection. Marked by this leap forward in our becoming, not only was the human being aware of its existence, the human being was aware that it was aware of its existence. Not only did the human being have the capacity to think and learn, the human being was aware that it had the capacity to think and learn. By virtue of the ability to reflect, we had the means to ponder and contemplate, the capacity to question and challenge our understanding of self and existence. By way of the human power to reflect, the consciousness that is the universe stood face to face with itself. And that first look upon itself brought an overpowering need to understand itself.
Meaning.
We exist as ourselves, and at the same time, as separate from ourselves. We carry on an internal dialogue. The threshold to reflection wrapped what was our previous top level of consciousness and creative function, the ability to think and learn abstractly, within a new level of consciousness and creative function, the ability to think and learn reflectively.
Old ideas reshape in support of new ideas, or if no longer needed, fall from existence. By way of the cycles and thresholds of the creative process, to learn reflectively is to advance the framework of concepts each of us maintains, and that defines our world. To think reflectively is to bring about this advancement. To communicate reflectively is to spur the thought process in another.
By virtue of the threshold to reflection, the individual conveys his or her understanding until it is embraced by humanity, and through humanity's assimilation, is internalized by the universe. We are the leading edge of time's progression. Our lives define the forward arrow of evolution's advance. The cycles and thresholds of the universe's overall creative process unfold within us. Our creative activity generates the substance of our internal world. The time-space existence we experience within ourselves is the external manifestation, produced by the cycles and thresholds of our top-level creative process. We create and exist within an orb of personal time and space, a construct relative to our own being.
With the threshold to reflection, the top level of human consciousness and creative function, disassociated from the structure of perception that is the body. Our consciousness aligns with, but exists independent from, the biological aspect of our being.
With the threshold to reflection, every human being constituted a soul. Every human being became a universe, in and of itself. To return to the level of the anthropological, who was that first reflective person? What might his or her life have been like? The details of our turn to reflection we may never know, but groups of reflective individuals did form. And the behavior they displayed, revealed through the archaeological record they left, marked the beginning of a human endeavor that would carry us from huts and caverns to computers and skyscrapers.
Early in the reflective period, in what is now Italy, we ventured into a cave to hurdle clay pellets at a stalagmite that to this day resembles an animal. Elsewhere we collected cave bear skulls, arranged them in cavern nooks, and put them in pits and stone chests. We also buried our dead. We laid to rest the bodies of our companions, placing food, animal remains, and flint tools at their sides. On their graves we set stones, spread ochre, and arranged flowers.
The period that immediately followed the threshold to reflection was a time when the most fundamental human ideas were in the formative stages. Our notion of a god, or gods, took shape, as did our notion of a soul and afterlife. We devised the earliest systems of spiritual belief and the earliest ways to predict the behavior of and manipulate our environment. We founded the rudiments of what would, one day, become organized science, religion, and engineering. By about 40,000 years ago, trailing arrow evolution had reshaped the human body in support of reflective consciousness. The transition to a reflective way of life was complete. Men, women, and children physically no different from ourselves, inhabited the earth, anatomically modern human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens.
Our anatomically modern ancestors carved figurines from stone, painted animals on cave walls, and decorated spear shafts with geometric patterns. They wore fitted clothes and adorned their bodies with rings, bracelets, and necklaces made from ivory. The tools they manufactured not only demonstrated functionality, but an aesthetic quality, a display of artisanship beyond necessity, and that varied from region to region, and from toolmaker to toolmaker.
By about 30,000 years ago, humankind had migrated through Indonesia to inhabit Australia, and, within the next 15,000 years, had migrated across the Bering Strait and along the banks of the northern ice flows to inhabit North and South America. By about 12,000 years ago, humankind had moved away from the nomadic, hunting and gathering, subsistence pattern it had inherited from its archaic ancestors, and began to cluster in the first settlements, urbanization.
If we were to imagine the Earth of 12,000 years ago, in terms of human awareness and creativity, we would see it as a vast globe, most of which was dark. Yet, scattered in this darkness, bright spots would catch our eye. Such would denote areas of heightened reflection, the location of the first settlements.
Only a limited amount of game could be hunted, and fruits and tubers gathered, within a reasonable distance from the settlement. As a result, the early urban community experienced a chronic need for food and other goods. The early urban community existed in an intrinsic state of resource scarcity.
Inhabitants, therefore, found it necessary to coordinate the way people hunted and gathered goods in the countryside, where they existed in surplus, and to divide them up in the village, where they existed in deficit. The human move to the settlement founded economics as we typically think about it, scarcity-based economics. As significant, urbanization founded a new view of the world. Faced with scarcity, we saw ourselves as in opposition to our environment. To us, existence was a struggle to eke out of the world what we needed to feed, clothe, and shelter ourselves. For us, life was a battle against the elements, a struggle to survive. Scarcity and urbanization established a worldview dominated by ideals of man against nature and man against himself. Scarcity and urbanization, ingrained in our being notions of class, wealth, property, survival, competition, government, and regulatory control. About 6,000 years ago, the Middle East was dotted with towns and farms. From this nexus rose the most expansive of the world's early civilizations, Sumer. The consciousness of a citizen living in Sumer reached out to embrace a vast geographical area, and the politics associated with an expansive social structure.
If we were to imagine the Earth during civilization's formative millennia, in terms of human creativity, we would see it as a dark globe, dotted with bright spots, each denoting a concentration of human awareness. From these points, rays would emanate, linking one urban center to another, and marking humanity's inkling as to the scope of its planet.
From Sumer, through ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, and ancient Rome, from the empires of China, the Indus Valley, and the New World, through the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and the Age of Enlightenment, the human experience advanced.
In this advance, we discern a trend. As the individual evolved to a greater consciousness of self and world, we were able to form stronger, more intimate social bonds. Social structure became less collective, and the family became central to humanity's ascendance. Societies evolved from those with a higher degree of central control and little individual freedom to those with a lesser degree of central control and greater individual freedom.
In the process of our evolution, we face a choice. We can direct our creative power to advance to ever greater achievement. We can also stagnate. We can direct our creative power to maintaining the past beyond its usefulness. To stagnate is to stall evolution. To stagnate is to return to an earlier, less free, creative, and fulfilling state of existence. Within the individual, stagnation reveals itself as ego, narcissism, and the unwillingness to question and challenge our understanding of the world. Within humanity, stagnation reveals itself as dogma, racism, ethnocentrism, fundamentalism, and the reverence for a way of life, governed by a ruling elite.
Defined by war, discord, uncertainty, steps back, and leaps forward, we can reduce the totality of civilization's ascent to humanity's battle to overcome stagnation. It is the struggle to build on, and creatively discard, the more collective social orders of the past, and create the less collective social orders of the future. Civilization's ascent is a creative process. History is our map of this process. 300 years ago, Galileo founded the principles of the scientific method, and Newton put forth the principles of gravity and motion. We lived in a world characterized by competition for material resources, and by competition between two outwardly irreconcilable worldviews: the within and the without.
In 1905, Albert Einstein published his special theory of relativity. In 1913, Niels Bohr hypothesized his model of atomic structure. World War I saw the first extensive use of tanks and mechanized weaponry. In 1915, Einstein proposed his general theory of relativity. By 1927, quantum mechanics had achieved a high degree of development. World War II saw mechanized warfare advance to a degree that dwarfed all prior achievement, and, for almost half a century, the Cold War held the world in the limbo of nuclear annihilation.
As humanity lifted itself out of the rubble of the world wars, and reflected on the Cold War, it gazed on itself with new eyes. In our rise to overcome the collective, never again would we identify with the beehive order of the empire. Never again would we see ourselves as subservient to the whims of a ruler, subjects of a realm. As individuals, we took ourselves to be unique, autonomous beings of value, not because of our place in the order of state or church, but for no lesser reason than our humanity.
Like prior periods of evolutionary advance, however, the universe's age of understanding is not without its end. Today, in the world of the living, the uncertainty that precedes the crossing of the universe's next major evolutionary threshold, masses within the human community. We face religious fundamentalism. We face scientific fundamentalism. We face economic fundamentalism. We face environmental fundamentalism. We experience the human potential left to rot by doctrines that serve the few, at the expense of solutions that benefit the many. Uncertainty grips the earth.
Today, the universe is poised to undergo the most profound shift in evolutionary direction since the transcendence to reflective consciousness more than 1,000 lifetimes ago. And, like the turning point to reflection, the crossing of this threshold takes place within the human being. Within each of us.
When we look back at evolution, we see the remarkable effect created by the acceleration of time. Cosmic formation lasted perhaps 11 billion years. Yet, It took less than 4 billion years for the universe to advance through the age of life. And in these 4 billion years, mammals emerged only about 225 million years ago, and the earliest member of the human line emerged only about 7 million years ago. Humanity crossed the threshold to reflection and set out to comprehend itself and its world a mere 100,000 years ago. We constructed the first settlements about 12,000 years ago and invented modern science about 300 years ago. The forces of evolution have drawn in on themselves to focus on a single point in time, the present. Reflection imparted the human need to understand the nature and purpose of existence, the drive to create meaning. Today, the universe, through humanity, has the awareness to fulfill this need. The universe, through humanity, poises to cross a divide in evolution, to enter its final evolutionary era, the age of fulfillment. When we embrace the within, alongside the without, we see creation in a way that is closer to its nature. We come to know the universe as an entity of consciousness, driven to advance to its ultimate form of existence. We recall its beginning in a state of emptiness. We look with wonder on its evolution. As we do, we find ourselves transformed. No longer are we merely a creature who is conscious of its own consciousness. Our level of reflective awareness folds in on itself, to embrace itself as what it has become. We grasp the nature and purpose of existence, as it was, as it has become, and as it will become. We accept our position as at the forefront of the universe's advance. Through our self-realization, the universe comprehends itself. The universe, through humanity, crosses the threshold to meaning.
Chapter 5, Fulfillment. By way of the cycles and thresholds, the trial and error, and the creative building on, and discarding of the old to create the new, that is the creative process, the consciousness that is the universe, advanced from an originating state of emptiness, through the evolutionary periods of emergence, structure, life, and understanding. The last of these evolutionary periods concludes with a most remarkable turn. Today, at the moment of the present, the universe transcends the age of understanding. The universe crosses the threshold to meaning. As creation marks the evolutionary divide to meaning, we take the first step into the universe's final evolutionary era, the age of fulfillment. What will become of the Earth? What will become of the cosmos? What will become of humanity? To some, the idea of meaning may seem wishful, fanciful. To what end other than meaning can the universe's age of understanding climax?
Like the threshold to reflection, the threshold to meaning unfolds within the human being. No longer will we be merely aware of our own awareness. In a manner no less fundamental, in a way no less ingrained than our capacity to reflect, we will internalize the universe's origin, evolution, and future. We will take creation into our essence, and indulge in the wisdom that such imbues.
As, by way of the human being, creation transcends to meaning, no soul can be left behind. Creation cannot achieve its ultimate state of being until humanity achieves its ultimate state of being, and humanity cannot achieve its ultimate state of being until every human being achieves his or her ultimate state of being. Every man, woman, and child is essential to creation, vital to the cause of fulfillment.
When we grasp who we are and how we came to be, we grasp where we are headed. Conscious of the universe's destination, humanity will put war and turmoil behind it, and align its efforts toward the cause of completion, toward the perfection of life on Earth.
Science will embrace the within alongside the without. The political, financial, and psychological influences that today grip scientific life will wither into oblivion. Science will achieve its most noble objective, to account for the nature and purpose of existence in its entirety.
Religion will enter its most prosperous era. God is the consciousness we call the universe, the becoming we have traced since its origin in a state of emptiness. We come to know God in a personal way, as a friend who will forever be there to guide and comfort, and to accept our guidance and comfort, as together we travel evolution's road.
Scarcity-based economics and the worldview of struggle, competition, collectivism, and central control it imbued will fall away. A new economic philosophy will emerge, one where every human being is free to follow his or her passion in the quest to advance the universe to its ultimate state of becoming.
Free from the limitations of socialism and capitalism, humankind will take command of evolution's trailing arrow and reshape our rural and urban landscape in support of the universe's evolution. The Earth will be our canvas. The world of tomorrow promises to be a place of unimaginable beauty and never before experienced abundance.
Generations will pass, and ever more grand cities will have arisen around the globe. Centuries will pass, and life without a cognizance of the universe's origin and purpose will have been forgotten. Then, however many centuries down the road it may be, humanity will achieve what, on crossing the threshold to meaning, it had set out to do. We will have perfected life on Earth.
At the moment we do, the universe will exhaust its potential to create fulfillment through the human endeavor on Earth. Uncertainty will build and collapse. The universe will face another, even more striking turning point in its ascendance. Humankind will cross the threshold to its death. If the threshold to humankind's death was as it seemed, though, our existence would have no meaning. If death was a terminus, an end that did not open the way to a beginning, what point would there be for our notion of the creative process? Why dream of building great cities? Why dream of perfecting life on Earth? Why set forth into the future at all?
With the advent of sex and lifespan, some 1.2 billion years ago, life and death marked the flow of biological evolution. Then, at that remarkable moment circa 100,000 years ago, when the universe crossed the threshold to reflection, the course of the universe's advance transformed.
The human ability to think, learn, and communicate reflectively represents a separation within the human psyche. Our level of reflective consciousness embraces the structure of perception that constitutes the body, but exists disassociated from that structure. With reflection, the individual became a self-aware being. We existed as independent in creation, as a soul, as a universe in and of itself.
Death is a transition, a breaking away of the essential self from the physical self. We pass from the realm of existence we associate with life, when our bodies no longer maintain the link between our level of reflective awareness and the structure of perception that is the body.
This breach in consciousness restructured the universe in the most profound way. On death, human essence rises above the body. Creation embraces human reflectivity in the realm of the living, or the birthing world. It also embraces human reflectivity in the realm of those who have passed, the worlds of the hereafter.
The death of a loved one compels us to ponder the nature of our existence, to ask what significance that person's life may have held, what purpose that person's death may have served. Death draws us out of our shell of triviality, to ask the fundamental human questions, as to how and for what reason we came to be.
Our own death forces us to reevaluate our experience of life, and its significance, concepts etched into our being by a lifetime in the unyielding construct of a physical universe, and the as unyielding ideologies that have come out of our quest to understand such. Life is the first stage in our existence, the period of our gestation, in an expanse of sentience, more sweeping than we may have imagined.
Reflection brought into being a universe characterized by the birth of human consciousness in life, by the flow of human consciousness across death, and by the massing of human consciousness in afterlife. Life, death, and the hereafter catalyze the universe's becoming.
The decades will pass. Those in the world of the living will feel a growing closeness between the realms of life and afterlife. We will more openly talk about death. Our interaction with loved ones, and others who have passed, will become more direct and intimate.
The centuries will pass. The boundary between life and death will weaken. The oldest of worlds, and the world in which new souls are born, the realm of the earth will rise to take its place among the countless worlds the human mind has conjured in the hereafter.
The millennia will pass. The breach between life and death will exhaust its evolutionary potential, and humanity will be ready. The boundary between realms will fall into evolution's trailing arrow, and vanish from creation. The sphere of reality that is life, and the sphere of reality that is afterlife, will become one, and the universe will achieve the awareness, to create its ultimate form of being. The universe began in the only state that it could have begun in, the only state that nothing could have come before, emptiness. Expressed in different ways at different stages of evolutionary development, emptiness is the sole and essential energy that motivates the universe.
The universe entered the evolutionary period of emergence.
The creative process is the mechanism through which the energy, that is emptiness, translates into evolution. It is the system of interaction, through which the consciousness that is the universe, and the aspects of consciousness, that are embodied, within the universe, advance to greater autonomy and awareness.
Through the cycles and thresholds of the creative process, consciousness expanded and multiplied. Time clicked and space differentiated.
Then the universe's age of emergence reached its end. Uncertainty overwhelmed and collapsed, to lift the becoming that was creation, across the threshold of autonomy and unity.
The universe entered the evolutionary period of structure.
The autonomous entities of consciousness, from which the universe was composed, perceived one another as the object of their need, and, by doing so, created relationships. Relationships perceived one another as object, and, by doing so, created successively more conscious arrangements.
Particles formed clusters of particles, and clusters of particles formed more complex arrangements. Atoms, molecules, the cosmos, organic molecules, and simple metabolic systems emerged.
With the cell, and its ability to reproduce, the universe rose above the level of simple structure. The cosmos fell into the realm of evolution's trailing arrow, and creation crossed the threshold to embrace design over structure.
The universe entered the evolutionary period of life.
Way of the cycles and thresholds, the trial and error, and the creative building on, and discarding of the old to create the new, of the creative process, the universe evolved to a greater awareness through life's design.
Successively more complex and conscious life forms emerged. Ecosystems became more intricate and aligned in support of evolution. Sex and lifespan appeared. Sleep and dream developed, and abstract thought and learning became dominant. Social structure became less collective. Personality grew more distinct, and physical form grew more versatile.
Evolution locked in the human mind. Within the archaic human psyche, awareness rose above organic structure. The universe marked a profound turn in its evolution, the threshold to reflection.
The universe entered the evolutionary period of understanding.
With the threshold to reflection, the human being achieved the autonomy to exist independently from the greater universe, as a universe in and of itself. This gave rise to a reality defined by two spheres of existence, life and afterlife, and by the flow of human consciousness between them. The universe had reinvented itself in a way that would catalyze its rise to perfection.
Threshold after threshold, human understanding grew. In the sphere of the living, we invented gods and religions, created art, myth, and ritual. We built cities, states, nations, and empires. We developed writing and mathematics, pondered the heavens, and probed the physical universe.
But the universe's age of understanding is not without end. Today, the within and the without align. We internalize the journey that is the universe's becoming. By virtue of humanity, the universe crosses the threshold to meaning.
The universe enters the evolutionary period of fulfillment.
We step into an era where wisdom and creative growth define the human experience. Our awareness of who we are, and of where we are headed, aligns our creative energy to the perfection of life on Earth.
We redefine science and reinterpret God. We invent a new economics, take command of evolution's trailing arrow, and rebuild the Earth's urban and ecological infrastructure in support of evolution.
We also step into an era that has an ultimate outcome. In the distant future, when the boundary between the living and those who have passed has fallen into obsolescence, the sphere of life and the sphere of afterlife will become one.
Evolution's leading arrow exists only in the present. To become what it must, the universe must abandon all that it has been. With the acceptance of this insight, with the willingness to let go of all that has passed, uncertainty will collapse. The energy held at bay by that uncertainty will propel the universe through its last evolutionary transformation, across the threshold to its final evolutionary form.
Life and earth will fall from existence. From the memories of physical creation, a structure of ultimate non-collectivity will rise. We will each be as the universe, and the universe will be as each of us. We will each perceive the universe and all other human beings as the object of need. We will each embrace and be embraced by the creative cycles of all others.
Consciousness will have reached its potential. Uncertainty will no longer grow. Time will flow but not accelerate. Space will manifest satisfaction. Ultimate autonomy will sustain ultimate unity. No longer will the universe be alone. Together, humanity and the universe will have created the consciousness necessary to sustain their fulfillment.
The within and the without are two aspects of the same movement, two dimensions of the same creation, two qualities that exist as a matter of how we look at things, and not as a matter of substance. Today, as I speak these words, the universe stands on the brink of transformation, poised to mark the threshold to meaning, and cross the divide between evolutionary eras. On marking the transcendence to meaning, we recognize our need for fulfillment, and direct our creative energy toward its resolution. The gate to a new world opens. We step forward. We pause and reflect. Within each of us lies the universe's origin. Within each of us lies the universe's evolution. Within each of us lies the universe's threshold to reflection, and threshold to meaning. On birth, we became part of the great movement that is the universe. We set forth on a journey that has carried us through life, and that will carry us into afterlife. Our life aligns with the lives of others who share our quest, and we are no longer alone. Creation cannot achieve its ultimate state of being until humanity achieves its ultimate state of being, and humanity cannot achieve its ultimate state of being until every human being achieves his or her ultimate state of being. Every man, woman, and child is essential to creation, vital to the cause of fulfillment. Through each of us, the universe advances. And when we each in our own way arrive, we and the universe will achieve the consciousness to create our ultimate future.